My guest today is Kjetil Holmefjord, co-founder and general partner of Sondo, an Oslo-based pre-seed and seed fund behind names like Dune, Tana and Enode. Before Sondo, he spent 7 years at StartupLab in Oslo and is one of the sharpest trackers of the Norwegian tech scene. Kjetil, great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
I always find the intros to be the most difficult because we actually know each other and I feel like it's so formal when I have to do the intro. So now we are beyond that and we can get started. So the first question, you were at StartupLab for 7 years. Now you raised your own fund. Tell me a little bit about that. What made you want to do that jump?
I think the best way to answer that question is actually to take a step further back. So my background before going to StartupLab was I spent a decade abroad studying in Copenhagen and New York. And then the last thing I did was working in San Francisco. And I was not like intending to go back whatsoever. I didn't have this sort of gravitation towards going home, if you will. But when I was in San Francisco, I met Alexander, who started StartupLab. And he sort of positioned moving back to Norway in a very interesting way, where his argument was basically in San Francisco, you're a very small fish in a big pond, whereas in Norway, there's basically nothing happening, but that's the big opportunity. He could point to Stockholm with Spotify, with Klarna, with big successes. What I'd seen when in Copenhagen was the same thing was happening there as well, with Zendesk, with Unity, with other companies. And you can make the argument that Norway could be on the same trajectory. We just hadn't started that journey. Going to Norway and joining StartupLab was like a way to actually kickstart the local ecosystem. There were sort of bigger trend lines as well, or indicators where you saw sort of applicants to geology studies, petroleum studies, they were sort of declining. So there was like a bigger fundamental shift in Norway also, where we saw that the talent was going into tech. And how do you sort of kickstart a tech scene from nothing? I think many people would say you have to have a big fund, you have to slash money into the ecosystem. But if you have a big fund, you tend to write big tickets. And if you write big tickets and there are no companies to absorb those big tickets, you end up making really bad investments and things go to hell. So what you want to do is you want to write many small tickets. You want to have a fund where small tickets actually matter. And you want to build a hub or a community where these people in the very early stages can actually meet. And that was basically the plan with StartupLab. Nobody really knows anything. There are no serial entrepreneurs. There are no sort of unicorns where you can learn how to build or anything. So let's have a space where all the builders can come and let's help them in the beginning and build alongside them StartupLab. That turned out to be a very, very good idea. We invested in Remarkable, Otovo, Ardog, many other companies. As we sort of went along, that product, that sort of incubate became more and more structured because we found a way of working and helping these sort of first-time entrepreneurs, researchers going out and starting a company of their own. But as that product became more and more sort of settled, it was also sort of more and more tailored for a certain type of entrepreneurs. What happened simultaneously was that sort of the bigger bet that I, if you will, moved home for, like there can actually be big companies out of Norway, that increasingly became true. We had Cognite come up, Remarkable became a big company, Gelato, Kahoot, and whatnot. And all of a sudden, we started seeing a different kind of entrepreneur also showing up more and more. The second-time founder, the operator with 5 years at Cognite, these kind of persons who didn't have the same sort of interest in going into a program because they felt like they knew all the things that we taught them at StartupLab because they had already done it somewhere else. And I saw that population, which in the beginning was 0 people, maybe 1 or 2 per year, was suddenly like 100 per year. And I felt that like this is also a very interesting opportunity to fund and help these companies go out into the international scene. But at the same time, doing that with StartupLab, which was a very good and is a very good program, but was tailored for a different kind of entrepreneur, it was like, couldn't really do it there. So then I had two options: either try to sort of convince 20 colleagues to change strategy from a strategy that worked to a strategy I wanted to pursue, which was like obviously not the best approach. Or the other alternative was just to figure out, like, I've been here for 7 years, super proud of what we built, but now the next step is to do something which has, in short terms, more flexibility, where we don't have any sort of programs, we don't have any sort of way of working with the companies. We say we partner with founders on their terms, and we work the way they want to work, which means we can be more flexible on valuation, on the kind of companies we work with, but still come with the same sort of founder-friendly approach and spend more of the time on the things that we think we're uniquely good at doing for founders, which is helping them connect with the bigger funds across the world, and also connect with all the founders that are in sort of similar challenges or positions as the ones we fund.
You raised the fund mostly from, or from a lot of entrepreneurs and operators more than, what can you say, just institutional LPs. Was there any specific reason for that? What do you get from those type of backers that you perhaps wouldn't get with the institutional LPs?
So partially it was out of necessity, if you will. That's the kind of people we knew. Both me and Henrik, my colleague, we'd worked with founders for decades. We knew a lot of founders. We didn't know too many sort of institutionals. But I think even if we had both networks, we would go to founders, especially for first fund. One of the more profound things that has been said about venture capital is like it's a bridge loan of credibility. Mark Andreessen said it first, and there's so much truth into that. Like when you're a founder, you basically have nothing. You have an idea. Nobody really believes in you. You have no customers. Venture capital can come in with a brand and give you credibility, which allows you to easier close customers and talent and next stage investors. And to some extent, that's true for funds as well. Me and Henrik, we had our own names and we had our track records and whatnot. But the more credibility we could build into our fund early, the sooner we would become a preferred partner for the best founders in Norway. And like, no offense to institutional LPs, but they don't have the same sort of appeal to a founder as the founder of Kahoot, as the founder of Spacemaker, as the founder of Dune, who are all amongst our LPs. So we were deliberate in that because that gave us almost more credibility, which again, we used as an argument to convince founders that we could be a good partner for them when they had many options amongst different investors. So that's why we did it. And I think like what you get with them is the credibility for sure. They also have like tactical operations experience that they are very generous of sharing. And many of them also sort of spend time in the ecosystem. They do angel investments. So you get like opportunities shared much more than the institutionals. So there are many benefits to having founders on the cap table. And that's why we chose to focus on them initially.
That makes sense. Do you have any examples of any of your portfolio companies of like how you like to work with them or how you found it? I have a ton of questions, Kjetil, that are all sort of overlapping. So let's maybe start with that because I also want to get a little bit into you have a newsletter and how that has played into all this. But let's actually try to just focus it in first and just look at like how do you go out and find deals?
So I guess like venture capital, there are 4 or 5 steps. Let's make it simple. Let's make it 4 steps. It's like finding the best entrepreneurs, picking them. They have to pick you and you have to help them. If we start with the sort of finding the good entrepreneurs, which I think is one of the things that we're very good at, is looking at the portfolio in fund number 1. 70% of the investments we've done have come through founders. So either like we've invested in founders we already knew, or we've invested in a founder that we were introduced to by another founder. So when we sort of look at how we find companies, very much ties back to just us being in the ecosystem for a decade, just meeting people randomly, investing with them, not investing in them, but hopefully making a good enough impression that they come back with the next company. So that's like one of our unique strengths, that we've been around for a very long time and hopefully not made a mess of ourselves. So they actually come back and they want to work with us. That is probably like the biggest asset we have in terms of like finding companies. But then you touched on with the newsletter, which I do. I write like a bi-weekly newsletter. I think it's now 4,000 people who read it. Mostly just like insiders, people who want to have information about what's happening in early stage Norwegian startups. And that sort of very much strengthens sort of our position, because when everyone reads that every 14 days, they're reminded that we actually exist. So when they think about a fund, okay, I'm in their inbox every 14 days, meaning that they know of me and they remember me, and that means a lot of opportunities come our way. So I think that's how we work on the first step.
First of all, when I was thinking about launching this podcast, I actually called you and asked you, like, what do you think? And you've done the newsletter, and one of the advice was, I remember you sort of drew a mental graph of like how little happened in the early days, and then all of a sudden, you sort of readers started coming in. So that was really good advice. One of the things I'm super interested in these days is how distribution is starting to matter so much more, both for software companies, but also for investors. Actually writing a short article about this. Obviously, you know your own website, but it's a very simple website. It shows your portfolio companies, your emails, your names, but it's very simple, right? And as it also has been for many years in venture capital, it's very sort of almost a little bit secretive, but then a lot has happened with podcasts, newsletters, and all this. And given that you have quite a big reach, as you just said, with your newsletter, how important do you think that has been for you you and Sondo? And how important do you think that's going to be also in the future to have that presence as an investor? Just think about 20VC and some of the Andreessen Horowitz and like how much they put into communication and creating their brand and all this.
I think that's a very unique sort of positioning thing we have in the local ecosystem, that we have a lot of readership, we have a lot of eyeballs, so we can sort of convincingly argue that we're different than many other funds because we have this asset which very few others have. But it also helped like practically when we were raising the first fund, because we obviously met with a bunch of people we hadn't met with before. But many of these people we came into meetings with, and they're like, yeah, I've read your newsletter for 4 years. So they felt like they knew me much better than I knew them, which was like a bit corny going into meetings. You feel pretty exposed from the beginning. But that meant they understood, like I've gotten the ability to share a lot of my perspectives with them. So they had sort of a big understanding of like where they want to go with their questions. But it also, to your sort of consistency, like just continue doing it. And I think like as a founder, be it for a fund or as a startup, one of the key questions everyone asks is like, do you have the stamina? Do you really want this? Will you do it for a long time, or is this just a whim? And like, it seems fun today, but tomorrow there's going to be a different thing. And having written now 189 newsletters, I think it is, I've shown that like, I want this. I can do it for a long time. And obviously I can't guarantee I will do it forever, but if I say I'm going to do something, I do it continuously. And I think that also gave people confidence in that we will be around for a long time. And also there's a 10 plus commitment in raising a fund. So that's a very key thing. So on the fundraising side, for sure, on the finding companies, we'll touch on that, and that like we're reminding the market every 14 days that we exist. But it's also because like the newsletter has the key component. I think the reason why everyone opens it is that it's the funding tracker at the top. Like what happened? It's basically like the gossip news of like Startup Norway, which companies have raised and whatnot. But because it's so brief, at least this is my view, and because it's written in English, every non-Norwegian investor that wants to track this market subscribes to the newsletter because they don't have the time to read everything. And I know they don't understand Norwegian, and they don't have the subscriptions to Shifter or DN or where these things are written. So they come and read the newsletter. And when they then sort of have a company they're looking at in Norway, or they're planning a dinner here, whatever, we're often like the first call for like who to do stuff with, because they sort of associate us with Norway. And interestingly, actually, so looking again at like the sources for where our investments are coming from. Number one is like founders we already knew. Two is introductions from those founders. But number three, out of everything, is like introduction from a non-local VC, which is sort of interesting because we collaborate much more with the local VCs, but where sort of the opportunities are coming from is actually from the ones abroad, whom we are more, if you will, sort of compatible with. We're more different. So they tend to sort of invite us into certain opportunities where they also want to have a local investor on the cap table that can do things that they are not as good at doing from further away.
No, it's very cool, and it's a very sort of talk about distribution as a mode, because good luck copying that newsletter, right? It's something you build up. How long have you been writing it, you said?
6 years now, I think.
Oh, wow.
It's been a while.
One of the other things I want to ask you about, again, jumping a little bit. So this is a question about AI. You said it's mostly referrals that you find deals, and then there's inbound. Do you use any tools, AI tools, to help you source deals as well? Just try to stay on top of what's going on.
Yeah, so obviously I think like every VC out there now paying for, we're paying for Evertrace and Spectre, or two different sort of LinkedIn scrapers. And I think maybe we found one or two investments through those tools. It's not like a key, like we want to be first investor into these companies before they have an org number, before they are sort of on the market whatsoever. But for us, one, we might find opportunities then, but it's also like a good insurance. Like, are we actually doing our job? Are we tracking the market? The companies and the founders that are coming out in stealth in these tools, have we already met them? If not, what are we doing? Like we need to up our game. So we're using AI for sure, or like these tools that are using AI, we're buying for sourcing. Our job is just so much easier now when it comes to sort of the next step in terms of assessing an opportunity, finding competitors, having conversations with chatbots on like how to think about these different markets. For sure, we use it a lot in legal DD and whatnot, starting conversations and understanding what we need to take to lawyers and what we can actually sort of deal with on our own. And we even got to the point now where we our sort of LP portal, where sort of our LPs find all our documents, we just vibe code it ourselves. So it's like we're using it across the board, and the privilege we have as investors, because we get to have front row seats at this with my sort of historical context, is like the biggest technological shift potentially ever. If you're not super excited and like getting your hands dirty on in every way you can, I don't think you should be in this job. But if you are, like, it's a privilege for sure.
Oh, I agree. One of the things I've been wondering about is when more companies have these tools, many companies see the same founders or the same signals. Do you also find that there's more competition? I don't want to say it was a moat before, but there could be some advantage to being good at that and being in the right networks. Whereas now with technology, everyone sees almost the same deals. Or has that not changed?
It has less changed where we invest, because many of the founders we've invested in, we've been there for 6 months when they thought about the idea. So they haven't really flagged it anywhere. Obviously, you can find it that they left their previous company. If you're a San Francisco-based or London-based VC, it's not like you don't have the capacity to go drink coffee with a serial founder who might go on the beach for 3 years, but who might also start a new company in 6 months. So some of these conversations were like, if we know there are good founders, we tend to invest a lot of time early with them to understand who they are, so that we can actually be helping them on day zero to found a company. But obviously, once the company is out there, information is like more broadly available. Maybe less so of a difference with the kind of founders we typically tend to invest in, which are like serial founders or like experienced operators, because some of them have already this network, like many of the VCs around Europe already know of them. But for sure, like the visibility for most companies, it's more difficult to differentiate on seeing. And I think like the picking and winning part of venture work, more the sort of competition has shifted to that arena than where it was before.
To what arena? So to picking the right companies or?
Yeah, so assume like before you could win by just seeing the company first and then investing before anyone else saw it. Now, if everyone sees it, maybe you create like alpha by doing the non-obvious company that everyone else passes on. That's a way to sort of differentiate and create good returns. And maybe you just sort of compete on winning. You have the best brand, you have the best value add, you pay the most or all. And you just like by being the preferred alternative to founders, you're chosen, and by that sort of you get into the best companies, and then you get the best returns. So it's harder to have like a thesis, like we see everything that nobody else sees, but you can have a good thesis on we make the bets that very few other investors dare to do, which to some extent you could say Founders Fund in the US has been all about, like even though they're obviously backed super strong founders, but in very sort of contrarian fields. And then you have the most of the momentum driven, like, okay, everyone sees this as an obvious winner, but we're going to sort of differentiate by just being the best. And that's a super hard place to be in, because Sequoia is there, Andreessen is there, and all those other big tier one US firms are trying to play that strategy as well. But the earlier you are, the harder it is to sort of be a consensus company. So I guess there's still opportunity in like the earlier stages for winning as well.
And do you think that having a public brand as a venture fund has become more the norm or has become more important? Because again, like almost everyone sees the same deals. What is it, except for perhaps, track record? I would assume is one of the strongest things you can have to help you secure the next great deal. Do you think like having a public brand is something that you almost have to have now? If you go back to, you see many of the funds investing in doing more branding, more communication. You have your newsletter, right? There are many have podcasts and all these things. Do you think that's because it's become more important to be seen and heard, and they know who you are, just like as you said that the LPs knew who you were and what you stand for, and you're thinking about this, that it's the same way with the founders looking at you?
I think that there are many ways to excel at venture. I think that one way is to have a brand. One way is to just like be good at picking, and you pick the companies that nobody else picks. And if there's no competition, you don't need to have a brand, but for sure it helps still. To have a story. So this is I'm probably paraphrasing a bit, but I heard a podcast with Parker Conrad, who is now the founder of Rippling. He was previously the founder of Zenefits, and he said something that sort of fundamentally shaped the way I think about venture. Because and I think this is all public information, because I don't know any of them. If I know it, then it's public information. But in Zenefits, they had Andreessen Horowitz as an investor. I think it was David Sachs who was sitting on the board. Obviously, PayPal veteran, like credential person. He's a lawyer, so he knows his words. He can speak very convincingly. And in the board meetings there, obviously he was coming in with good intentions, David Sachs, but he was arguingly very strongly, very convincingly for a different direction than Parker Conrad wanted to take. And because he was sitting there, he could hammer on the table and say, like, at PayPal we did X, and we went B2B, and that was like super successful, so we should also go B2B. And then Parker Conrad had this sort of intuition that they should go the other way, but he was not as good with his words. He didn't have the credentials to sort of back up his words. So the company ended up following the VC and went in a direction that ultimately led to the company failing. And when he started his next company, he said, like, don't trust VCs. Don't take their advice, especially not blindly, and especially not because, like, if they come in, they don't have all the context at all. They look at many different markets and companies in parallel, and you have to trust your intuition as a founder. So you can ask VCs for specific advice on specific topics, for sure, but sort of generally blindly following someone else and not you as a founder, you shouldn't do that. And sort of the second order effect of that was like, so how do I choose my VCs? I choose VCs that can help me when they're not in the room. So like the sort of previous, like, yeah, as a VC, you have to be a founder or you have to be an operator because you can be in the trenches and help the founders. I sort of tend to disagree. Now, not fully, because I think that you have a much better ability to empathize with founders if you had that role and obviously understand the questions better. But you can also sort of strongly give the wrong advice because you have survivor bias and it worked somewhere else, but you might not work in that company. But his take is like, so Sequoia, which invested in Rippling, can help him when they're not in the room because he can tell to a potential employee, we're backed by Sequoia. They were early in Apple and Google. They're early here. You should work here. You can tell that to customer, like, we don't have like the most solid balance sheets, but we have Sequoia as an investor, so trust us. So you can tell that to media and everywhere else. And that's like currency. That makes his job much easier as a founder. And I think that's why you want to have a brand as a VC. Again, going back to the sort of bridge loan of credibility. You come with credibility. And I think that ties back to us in Norway as well. Like, because there are many potential employees at startups that read my newsletter know of it. If a founder can say, hey, Kjetil and Henrik at Sondo are invested, and they know of us. So they sort of trust our judgment to some extent. They trust it because they know of us. And that might make it easier for them to sort of take the leap and join a company, which they otherwise wouldn't have. So that's like proper currency. And that means we can help the companies like step 4 after investing, but it's also an argument that means we can convince founders that they should work with us and not a competitor if they have options. So for sure it matters if there is competition.
Well, I think it's super interesting, especially because, like, of course, if you have the track record, you build that up over time. That's the strongest currency I think you can have. We've spoken about distribution as a moat on the investor side, but I'm also very curious about this for companies and especially for startups. Are you seeing companies focus more on this? Like, and distribution can be many things, of course, but is that as software has gotten easier to build because of AI? I have a hunch or hypothesis that distribution is just a lot more important and it's going to continue to be more important. Are you seeing this, or is that just sort of what pops up in my feed?
Yes and no. And my view is like distribution always wins. And for certain categories, like the best product is the best distribution. For other categories, like the best distribution is the best distribution. And usually then the best distribution beats the best product. As AI sort of obviously makes it, for certain categories, it's easier to build products. You will have more competitors in that market. And if all products are sort of fairly simple or similar, and there are more of them, obviously, like, you win more if you have the distribution by being a founder who's like prominent or visible, for sure. But what we're also seeing is like another reaction to that is that like some of these markets are so crowded that no investors want to touch the market because it's so hard to predict who will be the winner. And so instead of sort of taking a bet on like the second best in that category, you instead go to like very, very hard tech. Like, you go to deep tech hardware, like very, very, very far away from what the models are doing, because there the best product is the best distribution. If you can build a flying car that sells for $1, like, distribution will happen by itself. So a lot of capital is going to where there's like a bigger product delta because it's harder. because then like distribution solves itself. Because like the attention economy kind of thing, like distribution matters for sure, and visibility and the social feeds and whatnot, but the scarce resource there is like your time and attention, and there can only be so many winners sort of shining, and for every sort of eyeball Anton gets, another category gets fewer eyeballs. So I think like also some of the capital is going away from that because everyone can't win in that kind of distribution.
Let's say if you don't invest in that, and you've done some AI cases recently, I've also seen. Is distribution something you look more into now, or are you way heavier perhaps than you did before? I saw you invested in Mimir recently, right? And they already had a lot of customers and were doing quite well already. Of course, that's always a good sign. Is that distribution and proof just a lot more important than it was perhaps, I don't know, 5-6 years ago?
I think you could say like both me and Henrik, we have like business school degrees. We're not technical. I have some technical background, but like I would call myself a commercial more than like a technical person. Always, and probably to a fault, been focused on the distribution side because that's something we can more easily understand. Yeah, that doesn't mean we should focus on it, but we have a bias that we sort of go into those questions because we can more easily assess and falsify what they're saying. What we always think about is like the founder market fit. Like, is this founder uniquely good for solving this problem or going into this market? And our questions then often revolve around like, how well does the founder understand this market? And understanding the market goes into how do you sell to this market? What are the triggers? What are the buyers? How do you reach the buyers? So I'd say like we've always been fairly focused on distribution, and with more competition, that just means you have to prove even more that you can actually stand out. Just having like some hypothesis around distribution is not enough. Both because there's more competition and because like just finding the information about the market is so easy now. You have to actually show that you're willing to go the next step, get on the plane, find the customers, build trust, and you have this ability not just to talk about it to an investor, but also just like talk about it with confidence to a potential buyer and convince them. We've always been focused on distribution, but we're much more now focused on actually seeing that they're validated, because everything but validating it is now so easy. Building the product is easy. Figuring out who to go to is easy. What's super hard is like picking up the phone, calling someone, getting rejected, and just like doing it again and again and again with an intensity that few others have. That's the hard thing, and that's what we want to see.
A related question: do you think that go-to-market talent has become more important then?
We invest mainly like companies with a link to Norway. And I think generally we've had strong technical talent in Norway all the time, but we've never really had the go-to-market talent. And like sales has been something people have shied away from. And many of the founders that I talk to are like, yeah, well, we need more salespeople, but we have to call them business development managers, but because they're juniors with like 5 years education and they don't want to be a salesperson or AE, account executive. They want to be a business development manager. But if they get that title, they can do sales, and we're pushing for this. But it takes time to sort of change the perception of sales as something negative that someone who's selling a car does, to actually understanding that sales is everything, because it for sure is. And this is not my quote, but like the more senior you get, the more of a salesperson you are. You have to sell in to get your budget. You have to sell in like employees. You have to sell into LPs. You have to sell into candidates, investors. Like sales is all around. And the sooner you sort of just embrace that as a country, the better off you will be. Sometimes that's like direct sales, personal one-on-one. Sometimes that's distribution, being visible on LinkedIn or Twitter or a newsletter. But I think like that's where Americans are much better in general than Europe. And this is a meme that I'm not the first to bring up. I think it's always been important, but it's probably even more important now because the technical ability where we've had, if you will, an edge in certain markets at least is like diminishing. Then the other parts, it's even more important.
That's very interesting. So let's take that as a bridge into where you see the Norwegian ecosystem right now. You write about it every other week. So I'm curious to hear what you think. Where are we now, and how do you think it's looking for the future?
Two ways of looking at this. Like there's the pessimistic view and there's the optimistic view. And like if I can choose, I will always be the optimist. So I'll take that answer last. The pessimistic view is that like you look to Stockholm, which has like fairly similar population-wise, twice as many, but still fairly similar, same climate, same everything, and they're just like miles ahead. Gora, Lovable, Tandem, Klarna, like there's sort of legacy of companies. Everything there is bigger. You have a US fund setting up operations there because they want to be closer to what's happening, and we're not there whatsoever. That's like the pessimistic view. They are better at everything from politics to building companies to raising money. So that's like the negative view. The positive view is that if I compare today with like 10 years ago or 12 years ago when I moved back to Norway, I remember like the first years at StartupLab, we were like, if somebody like it could approach us and had a deck, I mean, an actual PDF or a PowerPoint presentation, they actually sat down for a couple of minutes and just put together a few slides. We were like euphoric. We had to like bring the entire team together. Hey, come on, you have to be join this meeting because this person actually has a deck. That was where we started, and still we managed to produce like Kahoot and Ardoc and Remarkable and many other companies that sort of came through that system. And today it's like, okay, 90% of the companies in our first fund have at least one non-Norwegian investor in the cap table. Like, so companies are like fundable, they're attractive to investors abroad. When you meet the founder, they have like everything in place, they have their sort of early validation, they know how to play the game. So we are like, and so we're like 20 times better now than we were 10 years ago. And if we sort of just lean into that and think like, okay, this is the trajectory we're going at, and it's like, it's not scaling linearly, it's probably scaling more to some sort of exponential function, we will like be even better in a year and much better in 2 years and 3 years. So we will maybe like Stockholm was following the same trajectory, they will also just like always be miles ahead. But I think like if we just continue building and continue doing what we're doing, politicians aside, because fuck them, but let's go tax free in this podcast. But if like founders continue to just be more ambitious and push harder, I think we will be even better in 10 years. But you have to be like patient, and you can't sort of expect that overnight change here, because it's such a complex sort of matter. There's so many things you need to tweak, and yeah, if you want role models, like creating a role model means leaving that person alone for 10 years and let them build a big company and then put them back in. So it's like you have to be super patient here. But I think the thing that makes me the most optimistic is that like the actual role models, like the companies to beat, like, or if you're starting a company today and you want to have the biggest company in Norway, you have to be bigger than AutoStore, than Kahoot, than Gelato, than Cognite. 10 years ago, the role models for the companies to beat were much smaller. So like this sort of tide rises all boats kind of thing is very true for Norway as well. And I think the ambition is gradually just increasing, and I think we will see the same in 10 years. That wow, how amateurish we were 2026. At least I hope that, and I'm in putting my career behind it.
Yeah, I'll add one to the optimistic view, and that is to see how many great people who have been in part of these scaling journeys who are going back into the ecosystems, either as operators once again, or as investors, or both, which is just fantastic because, as you said, like maybe 10, 12 years ago, you just didn't have a lot of those people. So like to get that, at least the flywheel hopefully started. It looks like we're starting to get there.
For sure, and it's it makes sense as well. Like you're working on important problems where sort of your work actually matters as well. And I talked to a while back, Andreas Toolstein was like the founder for Tool, and he said something that they were very proud of, and I think that's like not uniquely for Tool. It's like when people left that company, nobody went back to corporate or consulting. Like at some point, people left, but they left to join other startups or to sort of start their own thing. And this it's contagious. Like once you're doing it, you see how big of an impact you can have and how fast you can move if you're in the right company. So I think that more people will see that also as time goes.
Let's hope we will follow the optimistic view and hope it goes more in that direction. Kjetil, last question. You're an entrepreneurial guy. So you started your own fund and all this. But if you were to start a company, not a fund, today, what would that be?
I have a company, but if it would be a different company, I think like there are two answers to that. One is like a problem that I right now care about, and another thing is like what would be an area where I would have like the biggest probability of success. if I would go into an area, I think the area that I'm most interested in right now is the stuff that Alpha School in the US are doing. Like it's K-12 education, and where they put in kids and like their academic results are like 2 standard deviations improved by being there. And I think 7 out of 10 kids prefer Alpha School over vacation. So reading about it, I'm like consuming podcasts about it, and it's like having kids myself and just like sitting here in Norway and or in Europe as well, and just like accepting this standard of education when you know, or like at least we're starting to know that it's possible to do something which is that much better for like the most precious asset or precious thing we have in the world, which is our kids. Is like I hope we will sort of see revolutionary attempts at sort of solving that for Norway and Europe as well. So I think like that would be like problem that I would be very passionate about solving. This Alpha School is not online, so it's a physical school where you come in, you spend 2 hours on like an AI program where you sort of where it's dynamically adjusted to like if you know multiplication but you struggle with subtraction, like you don't get many multiplication questions, you get many subtraction questions. And like 2 hours every day, you sit in front of a computer with like an AI program that sort of teaches you everything you need to do. And you're like provably better than if you were somewhere else. And then for the remainder of the day, you're with what they call coaches, which is like you go out and you do quests, you build a cabin, you make food or whatever, and you learn what I think will like be the thing that humans need to do in the future, which is like collaborate, talk to each other, go into friction, disagree, figure out things. So you do that, but you do it in like more fun settings than interpreting a poem or whatever. Because it's the education system in Norway. It's my recollection of it. It's like it's a compromise of a bunch of things where like you try to do too much, and we've sort of just accepted that it's supposed to be painful. And it's the same sort of view I find we have in Europe generally. Sorry, I'm ranting here, but
No, that's fine.
where like the least harmful energy is the energy you don't use, which is like why have that we view when we can just have why not just make infinite energy which is clean, like the abundance mindset, which is like imagine if things are 10 times better. And I think like that's the view you want to have instead of like just sort of go grind and sit at school for 12 years and accept that it's like it's just like some unnecessary evil you have to do to be in the real world when it could be just amazing. And this is like this abundance mindset I hope we get more. I know like entrepreneurs are in general optimists and they have that view, and I think we diffuse that to more of the population. I would not be concerned at all that we will have jobs post AI, because there are so many things from an abundance point of view that we can actually do that we're not doing. And then the second also, like if I were a Norwegian entrepreneur, what would I do? I think I would lean into a very hard technical problem. I think I would, just because like we have this sort of heavy industry and like there's so much competency in Norway. Like when you're talking, I had a friend yesterday who told me about how Americans are talking about the sort of oil and gas production in Norway, and you're light years ahead of us. They're saying so that like when it comes to the heavy industries, there is so much things you could do in Norway that we're sort of not actively pursuing, both because the talent is here, but also because you will have less competition on the distribution side if you do something which is really hard, back to what I talked about before. And just because like the competition is so hard when it comes to like easy products, and because like you can complain all you want about this, but you're just like you are disadvantaged if you're in Norway. It's a small market. We don't speak natively English. It's very, very far from the US, which is like probably the big market to win if you have like company where you want to where it's best to scale fast. So instead of going into some of these markets where you're like disadvantage on talent and on distribution, go to a different problem which is super hard to solve. But if you solve it, distribution takes care of itself, and you will have like all the time in the world to actually get it to market. So that's like my 2 answers.
That's the tip for the founders out there. Do, I guess, a Norwegian or European version of, was it Alpha School? Or a very technical, hardcore problem.
And if you do Alpha School in Oslo, let me know. I want to send my kids there.
I need to listen to this. That sounds very interesting. Somehow I have not heard about this, but I need to check that out. Kjetil, thank you so much. This was super interesting and very good to catch up.
Thank you so much for having me. It was fun.